Ever since mankind rose from the dust of the earth, there has been theological warfare. From the First Sacred War to Saga Manobe to the Crusades, humanity's history of conflict has always been intertwined with the divine. Religion has been consequential in both meditating and sparking strife across the earth, whether it served to bring groups into harmony or create tension amongst men. The lives and deaths of millions have been irrevocably modified by the societal inertia of generational worship. This fact is undisputable. And yet, the wheels of history have not solely been turned by the hands of men acting on behalf of lofty names. The divine itself has always played a role in the shape of our existence, not solely as ideals or metaphors, but as concrete parties interfering with the course of fate to achieve their goals. From the time of Gilgamesh to the modern age, it was these beings whom the world was predicated on, pillars of whom people of unshakable faith would rely on when all hope was lost. And it was these beings who, in turn, granted boons and blessings to their followers. But as the wheel turned and the engine rose, the shackles of the divine had lost their grip upon the earth. The Enlightenment and subsequent schools of thought exposed the fundamental flaws underpinning the deific theocracy, that the gods' existence were built upon belief itself, and without this belief, they could be killed or crippled, like mortal men. But to undermine a god to the point of its nadir, you must destroy the belief that gives it form. These concepts were purely theoretical, until they weren't. The world was torn asunder by the Second World War, and beneath the surface of the veil, the Seventh Occult War ravaged Europe with intense ferocity. It was during these times that mankind came to understand the strength of divinity, and as the Axis powers began to dip their toes into controlling this untapped well, the Allies took heed. Although no major deific weapons were ultimately used in combat, this event opened a new Pandora's box of horrors upon the earth. It has been over half a century since that point. Humanity has successfully built its Tower of Babel, and now we stand among the heavens looking down upon all that once stood above. But humanity, as it is no monolith. And if we do not maintain cohesion among our nations, we are surely to find ourselves planted firmly on the soil, a foreign tongue in each of our mouths. While working for us, you will see men of great faith die horrible deaths. You will see blasphemous rituals, absurd caricatures of lofty beings, and horrors beyond the mind's eye. You will see weapons forged into holy calculus and guns pointed at the heads of the demiurge. But throughout all of this, you must remember one thing and one thing only. If you can kill it, it isn't a god. Now, this is a quick excerpt I like to read to all the new researchers in my department. And next, I'd like to bring you a brief overview of what you'll be doing here working in the Department of Tactical Theology and the SCP Foundation. So we are the branch of the SCP Foundation dedicated to strategically handling, containing, and utilizing religious anomalies. We were established in 1951, and the department aims to use research and the study of divinity to identify religious or belief-based threats to the veil and combat them. The department is divided into various subdivisions that handle different responsibilities. These subdivisions are usually headed by their own department leads and are either focused on handling anomalies associated with particular religious groups or overarching theological topics. Over time, subdivisions may be created, merged, split, or disbanded in accordance with new theological developments and research. The distinction between the Department of Tactical Theology and its older counterpart or precursor, the Department of Theology, lies primarily in our purposes. The Department of Theology handles the research and historical aspects of the study of religion and the divine, while we apply them in containment efforts. This distinction means that while there is some overlap in personal purview, a majority of responsibilities are evenly divided between our two groups. The current headquarters of the Department of Tactical Theology is Reliquary Area 27, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. The department also possesses various outposts, testing grounds, and observation posts, as well as an additional area in the Middle East. which, if you've seen one of my previous entries, you may know a bit more about. Approximately 550 personnel are employed by our department, the majority of which are stationed here at Reliquary Area 27. So the field of tactical theology. In the context of the anomalous, the phrase tactical theology refers to a wide range of interactions with the divine. Usually, this is in the context of militaristic strategy, although it has been used in other contexts as well, such as occult rituals or demonic contracts. What is and is not tactical theology is contested, but the general consensus is that the field encompasses most things that involve dealing with the divine in a concrete, scientific fashion. While the Foundation is the largest power that engages in the field of tactical theology, it isn't the only one. Other groups of interest, such as the GOC, the Horizon Initiative, and the Serpent's Hand, have engaged with tactical theology, and, like us at the Foundation, have studied the weaponization of religion extensively. The Horizon Initiative is notable in this regard due to its hostility towards other religious GOIs, alongside its plethora of captured Abrahamic-centric religious anomalies. Abrahamic-centric religions being, of course, a misnomer, as there really is no such thing as an Abrahamic religion outside the certain precursor that deals with Abraham and his descendants. One of the largest distinctions between the SCP Foundation and other groups of interest is the near monopoly that we have on information about the Akiva field. This allows us to wield theology in a much more organized and precise manner compared to these other groups of interest. What is Akiva radiation, you might ask? Well, it's one of the most important discoveries in modern tactical theology. Akiva radiation. Now, Akiva radiation is an approximate anomalous field responsible for interactions between faith/belief and reality. The Akiva field is known to have interactions with anomalous particles such as Humes or Eve levels, though itself does not have any unique particles. Rather, various factors of the field, such as the magnitude of its vectors in a given area, influence the aforementioned anomalous particles, resulting in changes to the Akiva field that alters reality. Akiva radiation is often referenced when dealing with religious anomalies, as the collective belief of worshippers consistently produce measurable changes to the field. Various devices have been created in an attempt to ease the containment of Akiva-based anomalies, with varying degrees of success. However, the problem of generating changes to the field without the use of powerful artifacts or consistent streams of faith, this is what we refer to as the generation problem, remains a major factor to consistent containment apparatus. Most information related to Akiva radiation remains heavily classified. Our department has a vested interest in ensuring that information pertaining to Akiva research and its capabilities are kept beyond prying eyes, even from the other departments. Although the purpose of this intense secrecy is not entirely clear, it is known that our department has engaged in various methods to keep specific details under wraps, most importantly, the dissemination of false information when necessary. You'll learn more about Akiva radiation in the following entries in this video series, but let's get into the history of not just our department and the Foundation, but of tactical theology as a whole. So, long before the Department of Tactical Theology was ever founded, the tactical use of theology has been a powerful and dangerous tool. Throughout history, various applications have been noted to occur, ranging from ideological warfare to divine intervention to even supplanting a physical reality in more extreme cases. So, in the Bronze Age, while the field of tactical theology was still several millennia from being academically developed, early civilizations grappled with both the anomalous and the divine, just as the Foundation does today, often resulting in pitting one against the other. Although records of events from this period are scarce and often incomplete, there are still several examples of Bronze Age peoples using religious practices, artifacts, and complex rituals in order to contain, protect, and even destroy the anomalous threats encountered across the cradle of civilization and beyond. 2500 BC, the Caral Soup Civilization. Now, the Caral Soup Civilization, which is in modern-day coastal Peru, flourishes as one of the initial 6 major population centers for Homo sapiens, as well as the only known site to exist at this time in the Americas. Most noted for their monumental plaza and mount architectural structures, Foundation research suggests that the Caral Soup were the first to utilize consistent and replicable faith-based summoning. Although this summoning method has been largely lost, the presence of organic instruments and human remains suggests a type of harmonic evocation. These tools continue to produce high Akiva readings in spite of Caral's lack of habitation for thousands of years. Even as a layman before joining the Foundations, you may be aware of these massive geoglyphs in the deserts and mountains of Peru. These are the hallmarks of the earlier Caral Soup civilization. 2300 BC, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Although not all events in the Epic of Gilgamesh can be confirmed to have actually occurred, research into the locations described in the poem point to signs of several reality-altering theological artifacts associated with the goddess Inanna, or Ishtar, being used. Of what archaeological evidence exists, the only proven change made by these artifacts was King Gilgamesh of Uruk redirecting the course of the river Euphrates to ensure his city's survival during a severe drought. King Gilgamesh is also believed to have used thaumatology and theology to extend his lifespan well past its natural course, expiring ultimately around the year 1900 BC. Getting into a group of interest, in 1800, the birth of Sarkicism. Now, this started as a slave rebellion in the Daevite Empire, ultimately becoming an anomalous religion unto itself. Now, the Daevite Empire, formed around the year 10,000 BC, was a slave-based, conquest-oriented society. The Daevites were highly ritualistic and faith-based, using various divination tactics in and before battle. This led to them becoming a powerful and terrifying force in the ancient world, mostly around Asia and what is today parts of China and Inner Mongolia, and one of the first groups to explicitly use what we now refer to as tactical theology. What led to the Sarkic rebellion actually occurring is unknown, though it is known that a slave born to a Daevite father and a concubine mother eventually gained extraordinary reality-bending capabilities through unknown means. It's possible that this individual was simply born a reality bender or type green individual, or accrued this power through some thaumatological ritual. This individual, who later became known as Grand Karcist Ion, proceeded to lead a slave rebellion against the Daevites in the northern provinces of the empire. This uprising, while not destroying the Daevites outright, crippled their empire and led to the formation of the Sarkic religion. The Daevites today remain a point of interest for our department, as their methodologies, intense faith, and the age of their religion make them experts in theological warfare. It is one of the most active duties of our department to ensure that the Daevites can never manifest in our modern era. 1351 BC, the reign of the pharaoh Akhenaten. In the new kingdom of Egypt, the pharaoh Akhenaten ascends to the throne. Upon becoming the pharaoh, he immediately declares the old pantheon gods of Egypt dead, disbanding the priesthood and enforcing the worship on the sun god Ra, which he worships in his avatar as the visible sun disk Aten. Akhenaten then assumes the role of sole high priest of Aten, undertaking the construction of an unknown ritual, which has been theorized would grant him reality warping capabilities. He was later assassinated by 2 of his children, Semenkhara and the very famous Tutankhamun, before he is ultimately capable of completing the ritual. The exact details of this event are unclear, but it is presumed that Akhenaten had deduced a number of key principles behind the functionality of the Akiva field, even if he was not capable of observing it directly. This is presumed possible due to the highly visible exodus of Egypt, which is hypothesized to have given rise to Akhenaten's plan to harvest the power of theology and belief for his own means. Egypt, of course, is a highly thaumatologically advanced empire. In fact, they were sort of seeded by the precursor Homo Eternus civilizations of the Sky Kings of Europa, leading to a lot of richness in the old Egyptian kingdoms leading into the new kingdom. 1200 BC, the Late Bronze Age collapse. This is actually referred to in our circles as the First Occult War. So, the Sarkic religion, having grown from a slave rebellion in the Daevite Empire, began to spread across Asia between the 16th and 13th centuries BC. During this time, their influence began to spread across the world, coalescing into the Kalmataka, or the Deathless Empire, forming from the nations under its banner. This empire continued to expand, eventually contributing directly to the fall of the Hittites. You may know in your mundane history as the Sea Peoples, a very mysterious group. With this threat becoming increasingly worrisome to the West, multiple nations united under the forces of the Mechanites, who believed the Sarkics to be a direct threat to their way of life and religion, which primarily centered around machines, metal, the replacement of weak flesh with the holy machine, and the resurrection of their broken god, Mechane. Tensions eventually came to a head sometime around the year 1200 BC, igniting the very first occult war. The full details of the war have been obscured by history, making fractal analysis extremely difficult. However, it is believed that the Mechanites' utilization of advanced technology allowed them to combat the overwhelming force of the Carnomantic Sarkics, including the weaponization of colossi in a substance believed to be an early thaumatological form of Greek fire. After a very long and brutal conflict, the First Occult War is believed to have ended with a Mechanite victory, although this is disputed by various sources. While the Mechanite Empire did continue for another 2 centuries, the toll it took during the war caused it to slowly wither and eventually collapse. Outside of the Mechanite Empire, the world suffered great catastrophe, resulting in what is now known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. The First Occult War represents the largest use of tactical theology throughout history, and as a result, our department has a very vested interest in finding as many artifacts from this war as possible. Many found still contain residue of their former power as Akiva sinks, making them very invaluable to our work in the containment of Mechanite, Sarkic, and Daevite anomalies. Overall, the war is believed to have resulted in 20 to 30 million casualties. Moving into the Classic Era. The Classical Era saw the beginnings of cultural imperialism, primarily through the expansionist efforts of Macedonia, Rome, Persia, and China. This resulted in increased trade of cultural mores, norms, and particular cross-pollination of religious ideas, the most obvious, of course, being the Hellenistic exchange with Alexander's conquest through the Middle East and Asia. Ultimately, these expansions helped to create not only new religious centers and models of worship, but also provided the use of novel rituals and artifacts to control anomalous phenomena in both the newly conquered lands and to provide solutions for those at home. 500 BC, the Curse Tablets. While commonly discovered throughout the ancient world, curse tablets proliferated in greater numbers during the Periclean age of ancient Greece. These thin plates, often made of hammered lead, were inscribed with pleas to liminal or primordial gods to counteract or claim justice against deeds in mortal realms. In particular, the usage of vocas mysticae, or secret names used only by the gods themselves, were believed to provoke a response with these tablets placed outside of the typical frame of worship or offering to a deity, and instead were intended to provoke or command the god to do the tablet's bidding. Of particular interest, there was evidence of active syncretism between the Greek and Romans using these methods to directly call upon the gods of the Egyptian pantheon. The most notable example comes during the Peloponnesian War, where the use of a curse tablet created by a Spartan commander invoked the wrath of Sekhmet upon Athens, which was believed to have directly caused the plague of Athens in 430 BC. All tablets known to exist have either been acquired by the Foundation or destroyed by the GOC. Now, the Greek-Egyptian connection is widely codified in our video on Hermes Trismegistus, on the Thothian records, and Manetho's list of kings, if you're interested in more about that early Greco-Roman theological work. The burning of books, 213 BC. In order to consolidate power, reigning Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang orders the confiscation and destruction of virtually every book in the kingdom, with narrow exceptions for approved authors, while 2 copies of each document are retained for the imperial archives. This is presumably for internal research purposes, as well as to ensure that the mass destruction of so many ideas does not result in the Qing dynasty losing the mandate of heaven and dynastic right. During the confiscation, an unknown person delivers a redacted SCP and absconds with the document, which then allows them to attempt to win the favor of Shangdi, the most ancient of Chinese divinities. Though the rituals described, archaeological evidence and local sources indicate that these rituals were successful, and divine weapons were utilized against the Qin forces during the revolt attempt of 210 BC. That particular SCP is currently in containment here at Reliquary Area 27. 14 AD. Augustus Caesar dies. In an attempt to ensure that the Roman Empire does not collapse or lose its foothold on the world, Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar engages in an unknown ritual. This ritual culminates in his death. However, it is apparent that through it, Augustus was able to influence the action of future Roman emperors. This phenomenon still exists in the modern era, and the anomaly is now classified as SCP-3853. 100 AD, the Battle of Ephesus. In what is now modern-day Turkey, the Jews of Ephesus faced severe persecution from the Mechanites that lived in that area. The aggression between the Mechanites and the Jews was believed to be high. It is believed that the Mechanites started this conflict because the Jews were spreading antithetical beliefs to the views of the Mechanites. As the persecution grew more intense, a holy man named Enoch sought to create a golem to protect the Jewish populace of the city. The Mechanites retaliated with brass automatons, creating a sort of golem-based automata arms race. In the end, the war between the Jews and the Mechanites came to a conclusion when all the automatons and golems were destroyed, save for a single hybrid creature which attacked both groups. This led to the evacuation of that area of Ephesus and mutual proscribement against both sides of the region. 1450 AD, the last great Gupta emperor. Skandagupta, emperor of India, is directly chosen by the goddess Lakshmi as a husband. Typically tied to the god Vishnu, it was believed a manifestation of Lakshmi appearing and choosing a mortal husband meant that the mortal was a likely avatar or incarnation of Vishnu himself. However, Skandagupta made no claims to godhood during his lifetime, and although he eagerly agreed to the marriage, he did not accept any worship in his own right. Skandagupta is known as the last great Gupta emperor of India, often defending his people and their lands from incursions of the Huna peoples of northwest Central Asia. Lakshmi would typically directly intervene in these conflicts, turning the tide of losing battles and bolstering successful ones. These victories allowed Skandagupta to gain a measure of fame that lived on within Hindi literature and dramatic works. His likely death in 461 AD was the beginning of decline for the Gupta dynasty, and further fragmentation and invasion of its previous lands would follow. The exact reason for Lakshmi's intervention remains unknown. Further, it is unclear how or what mechanism allowed for such a prolonged manifestation of a divine entity to occur, though archaeological and Akiva-based evidence have confirmed that her divinity was legitimate in the framework of the Akiva field. 600 AD, a divine conflict. Mayan villagers in the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula are caught in the middle of a battle between 2 Mayan gods, Tlaloc and Tlatutihuacan, incurring the wrath of the latter due to their lack of worship. Although Tlatutihuacan was easily defeated by Tlaloc, In spite, the turkey god then turned the curse he had tried to place upon his brother onto the village, resulting in an anomalous plague which continues to affect the inhabitants of the village and their descendants. 793 AD, Lindisfarne is attacked. The Northumbrian monastic community at Lindisfarne is attacked by a Viking raiding party, denoting the beginning of the Viking Age as termed by modern historiography. Ahead of the raid, citizens living around the abbey noted various supernatural portents. Whirlwinds, lightning, and fairy fires were seen flying in the sky, per several Anglo-Saxon texts, followed by a famine marked in the annals of Lindisfarne manor rolls. In addition to the extensive looting of wealth, the Vikings were accompanied by 3 female vulva, or Norse shamanistic practitioners, who claimed the raid was in fact divine retribution from Wotan. The connection stemmed from an earlier attack by Charlemagne on the Norse holy tree of Jormungandr, which he had previously cut down and burned during the Saxon Wars in 773 AD, as part of his effort to force conversion of its people. At the suggestion of Alcuin, a Northumbrian scholar, to his court, Charlemagne sent further missionary forces from Lindisfarne on several occasions to further eradicate pagan worship in Scandinavia. The unnamed vulva were said to each carry 3 wooden staves of great power, all hewn from the charred bulk of Jormungandr to invoke Odin's power directly during the raid, and then vanished in a cloud of ravens as the Viking ships finally departed at the raid's conclusion. The Crusades, 1095 AD. Under the direction of Pope Urban II, a military expedition, consisting of volunteers throughout Western Europe, is mobilized in a direct response to the unchecked aggression by Muslims invading Europe through Spain and illegally occupying it for centuries. This force, with the assistance of Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Comnenus, helped to fight the Seljuk incursions in the region of Anatolia as well. Although primarily led by princes and nobles of Western Europe, there was a great popular participation by poor Christians to liberate Jerusalem from the Islamic occupiers. While later titled the First Crusade by historians, the campaign was marked by Orthodox communities and other papal authorities supporting the established Outramar kingdoms, such as the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Antioch, Odessa, and Tripoli. While there are records of combatants across these conflicts attempting to directly utilize theological or ecumenical weaponry, rituals, or divine interventions, there is no indication that any divine authority responded to the efforts. The reason for this is still unclear. Heavenly Scripture, 1582 AD. Royal occultist and antiquarian John Dee completes the final of several intense thalamic rituals, resulting in the first completed account of a divine language. Referred to by scholars as Enochian, the script is believed to have been utilized in rudimentary first-hand interviews and several didactic accounts by way of alchemically induced divination, although this is assumed to have taken a severe toll on Dee's mental and physical health. Unfortunately, following the 1989 vandalization and ransacking of his personal library, a majority of Dee's completed works have been lost to time, along with the antiquarian himself. Despite this, a rudimentary version of the language was reconstructed from various surviving manuscripts and discarded glossaic ramblings. While Enochian remains the most effective communication between theologians and the divine, it also remains the most basic form of communication, serving as an almost middle ground between the human and celestial tongue. Due to its fairly rudimental nature, more complex concepts and symbology remain near impossible to translate, as further developed forms of divine language more often than not breach the framework of accepted linguistic conventions. The Summoning of Hermes, March 10, 1722 AD. Irish rationalist philosopher of the Enlightenment John Toland is killed while attending a salon featuring several famed occultists and esoteric figures of the era, including Marie-Anne de la Vie and Jacob Bruce. Attendees of the salon were discussing works and merits of Hermeticism when an unknown thaumaturgist who was present claimed that, After extensive studying of the so-called Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he was able to summon the Greek god Hermes. Toland, who was famously skeptical of most mystical religious belief, then encouraged the man to display this ability, wagering with his friend Baron de Holbach that nothing would happen. The unknown thaumaturgist proceeded to call support from the other Hermeticist practitioners in London, undertaking the ritual in the basement of the townhouse holding the salon. Witness accounts note that although a divine being answering to the name Hermes was summoned successfully, the being immediately departed after claiming to be far too busy for nonsense like this, but promised a replacement who was not. A second being then appeared within the summoning circle, surrounded by several leopards and dancing women, presumably the Maeonids, who answered to the name Dionysus. Toland's continued derision of theatrical tricks masquerading as divinity provoked the being's rage, and the philosopher was set upon in a frenzy by the Maeonids and torn to pieces. In an effort to suppress further iniquity by Puritan authorities, Toland received a quick burial, and all witnesses swore an oath of secrecy about the events of the night, though some testimonials of the event exist in Foundation archives. Moving on to the modern era. The Sixth Occult War, 1864 to 1868 AD. Although a vast majority of details of the conflict have been lost, the Sixth Occult War was believed to be among the most violent and influential of the anomalous conflicts throughout history. Initially beginning only as two factions of thaumaturges attacking one another, many anomalous groups quickly folded onto the sides of one or the other, spiraling the battle into a full, blown-out war. The anomalous world was plunged into the chaos due to the intense ferocity and sheer number of magic users, with estimates placing 93% of the anomalous world having some stake in the conflict. It was during this conflict that the Rite of Solomon, a powerful thaumaturgic ritual, was rediscovered by a German cabal operating under the name the Godless. On October 13, 1868, part of the ritual was enacted, but instead of controlling the summoned demiurge, the group destroyed it. Unbeknownst to most, this entity was responsible for limiting the anomalous influence of thaumaturgy on the world, and with its death, the wells of thaumaturgy suddenly opened. This resulted in a massive spike of anomalous activity worldwide, resulting in immense casualties and damaging both sides to the point where neither side could continue the war, ending in 1869. In 1870, various pre-normalcy groups, such as the American Secure Containment Initiative, came together to establish a centralized normalcy organization, which, as you know, would later become the SCP Foundation. Our group's central creation would establish the veil of normalcy, beginning suppression of the anomalous and ultimately leading to the status quo. Although rarely discussed among contemporary sub-veil scholars, the Sixth Occult War was a massive turning point not just for the anomalous world, but also theological thinking as a whole. With the death of the demiurge, many members of the anomalous world began to realize that Enlightenment perspectives on nidrosis, the study of killing gods, was not purely theoretical. This realization would soon unleash the potential of tactical theology upon the world, which led to the Seventh Occult War in 1939. Very important, in 1871 AD, the definition of the Akiva, in an attempt to scientifically prove that the Sixth Occult War had not killed the demiurge, Samuel Burnham numerically quantified divine presence for the first time by placing a crucifix on a scale within a glass case and comparing the rate at which olive oil burned within it at various locations. Funded by his colleagues and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Burnham traveled to the Ottoman Empire to perform further sampling and observed the same quality under different foundations. Based on this research, Burnham defined one akiva as the typical amount of divine presence in the city of Jerusalem. It should be noted that Burnham was unable to access the Temple Mount and the Hill of Calvary, which has even greater levels of akiva radiation than the surrounding city. Since only a small number of locations have a higher ambient akiva field, the Senta Akiva was adopted by occultists as a standard of measurement. It is unclear why Burnham chose to name his newly defined unit of measurement after the Rabbi Akiva ben Joseph, but comments made later in life indicated that Burnham wished to honor him. Although Burnham was baptized in the Church of England as a child, he learned to read Hebrew and Aramaic as an adult. The Pharaoh's Curse, April 5th, 1923 AD. 6 weeks following the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun, the financier of the expedition, Lord Carnarvon, is pronounced dead from blood poisoning. Occurring 2 weeks prior to a media frenzy falsely reporting that a curse had supposedly been found within the tomb. Alongside numerous other supposed cursed events during the expedition, current hypotheses suggest that this resulted in a manifestation of such a curse into existence. Additionally, as current Akiva readings suggest, this curse is not bound to the tomb of Tutankhamun and seems to extend to almost all archaeological efforts within the Valley of the Kings. Fortunately, due to the curse itself manifesting from misinformed belief as opposed to genuine worship, department contacts within theological and archaeological circles have been able to slightly shape the guidelines of the curse towards Foundation interests. This, combined with the large amount of esteemed anomalous objects still undiscovered within the Valley of the Kings, serves to prevent other groups of interest from securing them first. 1939, the Seventh Occult War. Now, I've made a previous lecture on this event in total. I won't go over it here. If you'd like to learn more about this monumental event, please see that earlier lecture. 1959, the Apotheosis Experiments. This is a study by our own office attempting to create a god. One of the most important goals set out by our early department was the successful synthesis of a god. The theory was that with enough trial and error, one could study the birth of a divine entity in a controlled environment, and hopefully learn how to control it. This major leap in development towards the birth of new gods and control of old ones would allow the Foundation to gain an extraordinary advantage in not only containment efforts, but also conflicts that may arise between religious organizations. See Project Prometheus and how far we've come in this endeavor as a part of Project Metagnostic. Although apotheosis was eventually synthesized, the so-called apotheosis experiments never achieved what they set out to do. While the understanding of Akiva radiation had gained significant funding and made decent progress, many of the mechanisms underpinning apotheosis were very poorly understood or misinterpreted in early literature. This caused significant problems for the team, resulting in many workplace accidents and, in one notable instance, the eternal damnation of a junior researcher, who remains irretrievable to this day. The apotheosis experiments came to an explosive conclusion in 1969, when Joshua Aaron, the department head, was inadvertently exposed to extreme concentrations of Akiva radiation in a short time span, 50 to 75 times magnitude increase in 0.3 seconds, while deconstructing a potent anomalous artifact. This event was presumed to have caused severe thalamic backlash in the immediate radius of Aaron, resulting in him quickly perishing from what was later described to be total organ failure. While there is little evidence to support it, a number of individuals have held on to the belief that Aaron's experiment successfully resulted in his own apotheosis. Currently, no evidence suggests that Aaron became a divine entity, and this line of speculation is generally discouraged by our department due to the possibility of enacting a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy resulting in a retroactive deification, kind of ruining the point of the whole experiment as a whole. Night of Frights, October 31st, 1992. The Society for the Preservation of Horror, a small cult of former makeup artists, actors, and directors who had been involved in the golden age of horror, infiltrated a horror film festival. The group planned to use the fear generated by the event to produce the energy required for a religious ritual, designed to summon the classic monsters of that era, including the 1931 Dracula, the 1931 Frankenstein, the 1932 Mummy, among others. Using these entities, they intended to produce even more fear, which they believed would increase the power of their cult for several unspecified end goals, one of which is speculated to have been higher wages for individuals in the entertainment industry. Although the ritual was successful, all of the entities summoned were mistaken for extremely dedicated cosplayers, and the cult's plan failed. Due to this, the Society for the Preservation of Horror broke up in 1993. However, this event remains noticeable in our department's history as it proved that under certain conditions, fear can be thought of as a form of worship and thus produce Akiva radiation. Discovery of SCP-5993. Marcus Ambrose is devoured by bees. Foundation consultant Marcus Ambrose is discovered dead, having become a host to SCP-5993, which is a hive of Akiva radiation-consuming honeybees via unknown means. Although posthumously credited as the discoverer of the anomaly, Ambrose's potential involvement in its propagation has been debated in more recent years given his more aggressive approach towards theological containment. As a minor but reproducible Akiva sink, the ingestion of SCP-5993-1s was a consistent safety measure against theological interference, severely decreasing the risk of possession or divine inspiration. This continued until the accidental neutralization of 09739, upon which the volatility of the divine when exposed to SCP-5993 was discovered. This volatility would later be expanded upon with the development of MDV Hive, or Cleopatra's Coffin, a deployable containment and neutralization vehicle that has seen an over 96% effective rate in deployment since initialization. Furthermore, utilization of SCP-5993 Instance 1 in interrogative efforts and religious dampening within the department has become all but standard practice, and its usage can be directly correlated with the severely decreased rate of faith-based contamination. July 23, 2021, SCP-7997 is born. On July 23, 2021, Bratchestone Shoe Polish Company achieves apotheosis through ill-understood means. It should be noted that it wasn't any individual in this company that achieved apotheosis, but rather the company itself. The means for this to occur are still under continuous study by our department. So that's a few quick historical excerpts for you to be acquainted with. If you'd like to read the articles themselves, please contact me or one of my researchers in the department, and we can get that info to you. This is part of an ongoing lecture on our Department of Tactical Theology. I'm Dr. Notissier, and that's all for now. See you next time.